Hello, I thought I would do a short video for you. It's basically looking at where do my homilies come from? Kind of what prompted me to start with this as a possible posting is in this time when we're kind of locked down and we can't go out and we just kind of stream church services. There might be a question of, well, if you're locked at home, what are you spending your time on? And the reality is that every Sunday we are still streaming our service live from the church. And in that service, I still do a full homily like I would do any other time and have always done on every single Sunday. So one thing that has remained consistent in all of this is I spend my week in part preparing a homily for Sunday. And so part of that would be, well, what does that process look like and what sort of time is involved with that? Well, all said and done, in a given week, I probably spend about 4 to 5 hours total preparing a homily for Sunday. And of course, the homily is something that you come to church and, or in this case, you see on a live stream. And it's usually about 10 minutes. You see 10 minutes of me speaking, but just so that you know, that 10 minutes behind it has 4 to 5 hours of preparation. So, what is that process and what does that process look like? Well, a homily usually starts on Tuesday. So today, Tuesday, when I'm recording this, I will start working on a homily. And the nice thing is that in the Orthodox Church, we live our liturgical life according to a calendar of readings. And so we essentially repeat readings annually. So this coming Sunday will be the 5th Sunday of Great Lent. There is a prescribed gospel reading that we read every 5th Sunday of Great Lent. And so I'll get to revisit that. And the nice thing is that because I've been a priest for a decade plus, actually I think it's closer to 15 years at this point, I have 10 plus homilies on this particular reading that I've done in the past. So what I start with is the gospel reading itself. What are we actually reading? Now, what we typically get in the reading is a snippet. And so it might be the sort of thing where Jesus is teaching something, Jesus is performing a healing, and it's just that little piece. So my reading is putting it into context. So it's, well, what happened right before we get to this particular reading? What happens right after the reading? Where does this fit into the overall flow of the particular book of the Gospels that we're reading from? Because you can see different things. During Lent, our readings are primarily from the Gospel of Mark. And so the Apostle and Evangelist Mark in his writing has, certain characteristics and things to keep in mind. Sometimes there are similar versions of the story in other Gospels, so I can go and look at those and compare. So that's what the reading part starts from. Also, because we understand that Scripture is within the life of the church, I am not limited to just reading the Bible. We're not, sola Scriptura Protestants. It's part of Holy Tradition. So I look towards other things in our Holy Tradition. So first and foremost is what are the services for that Sunday? So I will look at, the hymns for Sunday, the service texts for Vespers Orthros liturgy, and see if there is something about that gospel reading that fits in with those other themes. Usually that has more to do with if there's a major feast, because the hymnody tends to play more off of the reading, but there can always be certain things in there that might inform the gospel reading outside of those festal days. Also, as I mentioned, part of my reading, we're still on Tuesday, and what I look at on Tuesday is what I've done in the past. So I keep notes from all of my homilies, and I will go back and I'll read back through them, get the sense of what I have preached in the past. And something I'm looking forward to is in the past few months here, we've started recording homilies and keeping them on our YouTube channel. So once we get to the point it'll be this fall when we start hitting those homilies that were already recorded last fall. I'll be able to review a video and see what I preached on last year. And so that gives me a sense of what I've spoken on, what I've touched on, what I've emphasized in the past, and get an idea of where we've been. And so that's kind of Tuesday as my preparation day. Well, after that, and this is Wednesday, usually Wednesday and Thursday, I'll start engaging in some reading and writing. So usually where I look towards with reading is, again, with this idea of Scripture exists within the life of the church. So I will look at who has commented on the text. And I rely on just a few things here. So they are saints of the church, as it were. Kind of my go-to resources are, and I have these in my personal library. There's a saint, Theophylact of Ohrid. He's a Bulgarian saint who lived about 1,000 years ago. And his works are essentially the cliff notes, as it were, to what church fathers have written about different books of the Bible. So I can go find his writing on the particular passage that we have for Sunday, read through that, and get a sense overall of how the church has understood that passage. Related to that, I have a 2-volume set. They're homilies written by St. Nicolae of Zicha, who was a Serbian saint from the 20th century. He's not just a Serbian saint, he's a Holocaust survivor and was a saint in North America. He's also known as St. Nicholas of South Cana. He was instrumental in the formation of St. Tikhon Seminary in Pennsylvania. And so he has homilies on every feast day and every Sunday of the year. So I can read one of his homilies. And these are lengthy multi-page homilies, so there's a lot of material in there that I can look at. The last things that I look at this point in terms of resources is Archbishop Dimitri of Dallas. He reposed about 10 years ago, but he wrote several books that were commentaries on Scripture. And two of my favorites are, he wrote a book called The Parables of Christ, and he also wrote The Miracles of Christ. And considering that a number of our Sunday readings tend to either be parables or miracles, he has some helpful, insightful things in his writing as well. So I'll read through those, get informed, and then I will do this writing process. And basically the writing process that happens over Wednesday and Thursday and often into Friday is me just dwelling on all of that. So everything I've read, everything I've done in the past, everything I may have read in the current week, and I do it by longhand. I don't type. I've tried typing homilies in the past, and the process of typing something on a keyboard for me is very different than writing it by longhand. I actually find that writing by longhand connects better with how I think. And I know people have done studies about analog as opposed to digital, and there's some evidence to support that cognitively we tend to think more when we're handwriting as opposed to typing. I also find that if I try and type things out, I tend to get stuck on this whole thing of producing a product. So it's kind of like a written text. And so I'll get very much focused on formatting and grammar and spelling and am I saying this properly? And it's more about producing an artifact as opposed to preparing a homily. So that writing process, a good part of it is basically to get all my bad ideas out of the way, because I have a number of things that might initially be, well, I need to do this, and that tends to be the kind of the darker. Well, I need to admonish everyone to behave, and so this homily needs to be about this thing. So I have to get all that out of my system, and it comes back to what are people dealing with this week and at this point in their lives, at this point in the year, and what does our gospel reading and all of this associated understanding have to address that? And so that's the point I try to get to when I finally do the final version of the homily. And the final version is I'll do the next step that's in a writing process, and that is I actually will write out an outline of the homily. And again, it's the sort of thing where I do it by hand. I get a picture in my head of where I want to go, the points I want to make, if there are examples or illustrations, and write it all out. So I think through the process on paper. And a lot of times that ends up being Saturday night. So it's fresh in my head for Sunday morning. And it can be this laborious thing where I go off in a room and I'm kind of in there for at least an hour. And it's probably the most time-consuming part of all of this. But if you watch my homilies, part of it is that I preach without notes or without things in my hand. So there is this preparation, but I'm not doing it just on the fly, as it were. I actually prepare it all and kind of have a picture and something that's actually thought out and organized before I actually step in front of everyone on Sunday morning. So that's kind of my process. It's kind of fun to pull back the curtain and let you see all of that, but something I thought I would share with you. And I'm still doing it here, even though I'm at home. We'll be in touch. God bless.